October 17, 1944, 05:26 a.m. The morning fog clung low across the Pacific as U.S. supply convoy 382 crawled toward Leyte Gulf. 7 cargo ships, 2 fuel tankers, 3 escort destroyers. Inside the flagship transport USS Regal, Chief Engineer Thomas Keller slammed his clipboard onto the engine console. "Pressure again?" he barked. The gauges flickered red. No one answered. They already knew the problem. One of the convoy's freshwater distillers, the machine that turned seawater into drinkable water for all ships, had failed in the night, and the rest of the convoy relied on Regal's supply. Without water, the crews couldn't cook, clean, treat wounds. And worse, the steam-driven cargo cranes would seize, making offloading impossible. The entire invasion timetable depended on those cranes. Keller ran his hand across the bent copper piping. Salt corrosion had eaten through the feed line, leaving a crack just wide enough to kill output. They had no replacement pipe, no ship close enough to assist, and no time to turn back. The captain asked the only question left. "How long until we run out?" Keller checked the log. "At the current rate? Maybe 12 hours. The convoy would be dead in the water." While officers argued, voices rose until one sailor muttered quietly, "What about the Japanese POW?" Heads turned. In the ship's lower deck, in a makeshift holding cabin, sat Private Hiroto Saito, a Japanese aircraft mechanic captured 2 weeks earlier after his floatplane crashed during a storm. He barely spoke English. He kept to himself. He never asked for anything. But every American had noticed one thing. He would stare, long, focused, at broken tools, rusted bolts, seized hinges, as if solving them silently. Keller shook his head. "I'm not trusting a Japanese mechanic with our entire convoy's water system." But the captain wasn't so sure. At 6:02 a.m. he ordered, "Bring the prisoner to engineering. Let's see what he knows." What harm could it do? But Saito wouldn't just offer knowledge, he would offer something else. A fix so simple, so ridiculous, so stupid, that every American engineer laughed at him, until they realized it might be the only thing keeping the convoy alive. 06:18 a.m. Hiroto Saito stood quietly in front of the cracked seawater feed line, hands cuffed, 2 Marines behind him. Chief Keller pointed at the pipe. "You know what this is?" Saito nodded once. "Distiller intake. Cracked. Here." He traced the air above the split without touching it. "How would you fix it?" Keller asked, half mocking. Saito studied the metal. His eyes narrowed, not fearfully but mechanically, the way a man reads a problem the world has given up on. He finally said, "No replacement, yes?" Keller sighed. "Correct." Saito thought for a moment. Then he requested, in slow English, "Give me canvas strip, rubber patch, and wire." Keller blinked. "A patch? On a high-pressure line? It'll blow in minutes." Saito shook his head. "No, wire, twist, slow, even, make pipe squeeze itself, closed." The Marines exchanged looks. Keller scowled. "That's not engineering. That's a stupid fix." Saito simply lowered his head. "Stupid, but working." The captain pulled Keller aside. "Chief, we're out of options." Keller muttered, "If this fails, our distiller explodes. We lose the entire system." But at 6:42 a.m. he finally ordered, "Fine, let him try." Saito knelt on the deck, guards watching every move. He wrapped the rubber patch around the split, covered it with a tight canvas band, and began twisting wire around the whole assembly. Not too tight, not too loose, each turn perfectly spaced, like he had done this 1,000 times. Keller couldn't help but ask, "Where'd you learn that?" Saito answered quietly. "Father. Rice farm. Pumps, always old. Metal, always broken, but water, always needed." It wasn't military training, it was survival. At 7:09 a.m. he stood and nodded at the engineers. "Pressure, slow, slow." Keller opened the valve cautiously. The patched pipe trembled, then steadied. Pressure rose, held, climbed again. No spray, no leak. The distiller hummed back to life, a stupid fix, holding under full operating pressure. Keller removed his cap. "God help me, it's working." But the story wasn't finished. because at 7:31 a.m. the convoy would face a danger far worse than thirst, and Sato's stupid fix would become the only thing standing between the convoy and total destruction. 7:31 a.m. The water distiller throbbed at full output, restored by the POW's improvised repair. Convoy 382 pushed forward with confidence restored. But trouble was coming. At 7:46 a.m., the destroyer USS Halford signaled a warning. Enemy aircraft detected, low altitude, closing fast. Japanese kamikaze groups had begun targeting supply ships because cutting supplies meant cutting the invasion itself. A single hit on a tanker or a cargo ship filled with ammunition would turn the ocean into fire. The convoy scattered into defensive formation. Anti-air crews scrambled, engines roared, gunners braced themselves. Saito, still under guard, heard the alarm and stiffened. He knew what was coming. At 8:03 a.m., 2 Japanese planes broke through the cloud cover, Kai-51 dive bombers. They weren't here to dogfight, they were here to sink the convoy. The first bomber dove toward the USS Regal, the ship carrying Saito. Keller yelled, "All power to pumps and fire mains." But the ship's steam auxiliary lines were tied directly to the water distiller. If the patched pipe failed now, under maximum pressure, the ship would lose steam instantly. Fire pumps would stall. Damage control teams would be useless. One bomb hit would sink them. At 8:06 a.m., the bomber released. A black shape tore through the sky, aimed directly at Regal's midsection. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire, tracer rounds streaked upward. But the drop angle was perfect. Too perfect. Keller stared at the pressure gauge, the patched pipe vibrating under extreme load. "Hold! Damn you! Hold!" The bomber closed in. And then, boom! An American 40mm shell hit the bomber's wing. The plane spun, clipped the water, and vanished. The second bomber retreated under fire. The convoy was safe because the distiller hadn't failed, because water pumps stayed alive, because firepower remained ready, because the stupid fix had held. If that pipe had blown, Regal would have been defenseless, and a tanker behind them, loaded with 3 million gallons of fuel, would have been an instant firestorm. The entire convoy would have been doomed. At 8:19 a.m., Keller approached Saito. "You didn't just fix a pipe," he said quietly. "You saved every man in this convoy." Saito didn't reply. He simply looked down, not out of pride, but out of something else: humility. The Americans didn't know that Saito had lost his entire squadron weeks earlier to a US bombing run. He had every reason to hate them, but he didn't, because survival doesn't wear a flag. 9:12 a.m. Convoy 382 reached Leyte Gulf intact. Not a single ship lost. Not a single cargo delayed. A miracle in wartime logistics. And somewhere in a quiet cabin, a Japanese POW sat alone, hands folded, waiting to be escorted back to the holding area. At 9:27 a.m., the convoy commander boarded Regal. He demanded a full engineering report. Keller handed him the clipboard. The commander read in silence. Then he looked up slowly. "You're telling me this convoy was saved because of a Japanese prisoner's repair?" Keller replied, "Sir, without that fix, the distiller would have shut down. Fire suppression, pumps, engines, cranes, everything would have failed." "And the enemy attack?" the commander asked. "We would not have survived it." The commander walked to Saito. He studied him carefully. "You could have done nothing," he said. "You could have watched us fail." Saito responded softly, "My father say, water is life. Even enemies need life." The captain exhaled. War had taught him many things, but rarely mercy from the other side. Later that year, long after Saito had been transferred to a POW camp in California, Keller received a small package. Inside was a note written in simple English. "Stupid fix, yes, but stupid things sometimes save lives. Thank you for letting me try." Attached was a hand-drawn diagram, the same wire wrap technique Saito had used, with a final line beneath it. For when metal fails, but people do not. If stories like this remind you that humanity can survive even inside war itself, subscribe, share, or leave a comment. And if you ever wish to donate or support this kind of storytelling, you can reach me on Instagram.